It's Christmas Eve and Santa can't find the reindeer. Oh no. How will he deliver the toys to all the boys and girls? Where, oh where could they be? That's the premise of the game we're having a look at today, Reindeer Rescue for the Atari 2600. As you might well imagine from the blurb I just read from the manual, the game sees you playing as the big man in red himself as he attempts to rescue reindeer. There are 2 reindeer to collect each level, and as tradition dictates, Santa's sleigh is pulled by 8 reindeer, which means we can utilize the power of mathematics to work out that this game has in total 4 levels, a fact that is confirmed to us in the manual. But these statistics may well leave you wondering, but what about the most famous reindeer of all? Where does Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer factor into this game? And the answer is, rather disappointingly, that as far as I can tell, he simply doesn't. At first I assumed that the game was set in the distant past, during a time in Rudolph's life in which all the other reindeer still laughed and called him names. Although if we take closer look at the evidence, which of course we should, Robert Louis May's historical account of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer becoming part of Santa's sled team came out in the form of a peer-reviewed essay in 1939. Why this is important is because a close reading of the manual mentions that Santa is not the athlete he used to be, and then refers to a state championship in 400-meter sprint which took place in 1943, which means that since this game is definitely set after 1943, and since 1943 comes after 1939, it raises the question, where's Rudolph? However, where Rudolph is becomes quite clear if you have a quick look at the background of level 1, which reveals a shiny sun and bright blue sky. And since everyone knows that Rudolph has no obligation to work Christmas Day if it is not foggy or smoggy, it makes sense that he's not in this game. It's in his contract. And now that we've covered the curious absence of Rudolph from this game, which I know you are all concerned about, let's get to talking a little bit more specifically about the game itself. And first on the agenda is the controls, which are relatively simple. You, playing as Santa Claus, can make the Jolly Man jump by clicking the red button and make him move by jiggling your pleasure stick, which might sound relatively similar to yet another game that we've reviewed on this channel, in which you also play as a red character who jumps with the red button, moves with the pleasure stick, and makes his way through levels. Yes, it seems that I cannot go through one Christmas video without referring back to Donkey Kong, because if memory serves correctly, I brought it up when talking about Stay Frosty 2 also. When bringing up the similarities between Stay Frosty 2 and Donkey Kong last year, it was almost entirely due to the controls and gameplay. However, when comparing it to Reindeer Rescue, there is one extra thing that cannot be overlooked, which is of course the graphics. The similarities between the 2 characters should simply not be ignored. They are, of course, as I've stated, both wearing red suits, which I feel is enough to establish that they are in fact the same character. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that Donkey Kong, in which you play as a young Santa Claus before his beards come in, is a prequel to Reindeer Rescue, which makes a lot of sense and kind of explains why the bad guy is a gingerbread man who throws cookies at you. Although we're not here today to talk about Donkey Kong, as we've already done that previously. And so back onto Reindeer Rescue, where the controls of the game are actually considerably tighter than that of Donkey Kong, giving you a lot more control over the character. You see, in Donkey Kong, if you want your little Santa Claus to jump, you simply click the red button and he'll jump upwards, press left on your pleasure stick and click the red button and he'll jump up and left, and press right on your pleasure stick while clicking the red button and he'll jump up and right. Each of these 3 jumps will propel your character the same distance every time you do it, as the height and distance of the jump is predetermined from the point of initiation. However, in Reindeer Rescue, this is very much not the case, and you can change the direction Santa Claus is moving at any point of the game, regardless of whether or not his feet are on the ground. You could be mid-leap, moving at high speeds, and realize that you're about to run out of space to land on what you're trying to land on, and immediately correct this by pushing left on your pleasure stick, dropping Santa's speed rapidly. However, he cannot jump left, not because he's related to Derek Zoolander or anything, but because it's simply how the gameplay of the game is designed. You see, unlike Donkey Kong, the level in Reindeer Rescue is not static but always moving left, or I suppose more accurately, Santa Claus is always moving right and the camera is tracking him. It's like one of those cool continuous one-shot takes you see in those artsy movies. You know, like in Dismembering Christmas or something. This, like most things in life, both have its positives and negatives. In the realm of positives, it's far more interesting to look at than a static screen would be. You're always wanting to know what comes next, and while the map's not randomized, there's certainly plenty to see. There are branching paths to pay attention to, the reindeer that when you collect 2 of them it'll take you to the next level, and items that give you points and extend your energy bar. The energy bar is an interesting aspect to this game, which I think could have probably been taken further. It works a lot like the melting in Stay Frosty, in which which you have to pick up items to maintain staying alive. However, unfortunately, I never found myself really at a risk of running out of energy. I think it would have been far more interesting in the game if the energy drained quicker and there were more items to collect to extend it. As I mentioned earlier, visually, the game is fantastic to look at, and this is really sold by just how the background and foreground of the game looks. While everything in the foreground is moving one way, everything in the background is moving the opposite way, really selling the idea that you're moving quite far across the terrain. And on top of that, it's all quite Christmassy, if not so much for the foreground, then definitely the background, as we see many Christmassy and North Pole icons moving past, including but not limited to a polar bear, a train which I assume is the Polar Express, a snowman which is almost certainly Frosty making a cameo appearance, a sled being pulled, and an AT-AT being chased by a snowspeeder? I mean, surely not, but it looks exactly the same as it does in Star Wars Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600. Oh, wait. A snowspeeder just flew across the foreground, and it looks exactly as it does in the film, not just the game. This game's Star Wars Snowspeeder actually looks better than the snowspeeder in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back for the Atari 2600. Look at that, it's a thing of total beauty, which I suppose means Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back is confirmed as a Christmas movie. Hoth is actually a place found in the North Pole, and even more exciting and somewhat hilarious, it means that while you're doing the epic battle in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back on the Atari 2600, just below you, only just out of sight, is Santa Claus frantically trying to find his reindeer. Now that's funny. But I digress, and to get back on topic, somehow we're going to follow that piece of awesomeness with the negative, which I assure you is not hugely negative, so don't worry too much. It doesn't take away from how amazing that Star Wars cameo is. Although, unfortunately, it does mean that this game is following the somewhat disappointing tradition of Stay Frosty 2, in which it is a game that I'm reviewing that I have actually not quite finished. You see, usually when I'm doing one of these reviews, if the game has an ending, I don't do the review until I have reached it, which is totally not why Grin reviews update so sporadically, shut up, but unfortunately, since Christmas is time sensitive, I don't really have time to keep trying to pass the game because Christmas is tomorrow, and I have already sunk so many weeks into trying to beat the 3rd level. And so the downside to the always scrolling level, which is not really so much of a downside because it's just how the game is, and if you don't like it, find a different game I suppose, but the only slight negative is that since you can't really move left because of how quickly everything's moving right, if you misjudge a jump, there's no way to correct it because you're going to be pushed against whatever's coming at you from the right, and there's plenty of obstacles that are too tall for you to jump over. Essentially, this means that if your timing is not absolutely perfect, you're going to find yourself trapped behind a house or a light pole or something, and slowly and unavoidably be pushed into the left-hand side of the screen, which will take one of your lives away. Now, this in itself is definitely not a negative. It is the basic core gameplay of the game, and I think it's actually quite good. It's fast-paced, and in the 3rd level, and I can only assume the 4th level, it really gets the adrenaline pumping. However, it does have a negative somewhat connected to it, which I think could have definitely been avoided. You see, the game has a lot of trial and error, whether it be in the 3rd level, having to know what's coming up next basically before jumping on the right-hand side of the screen, or having to know which of the branching paths are better to take in the 2nd level. Now, this would still be fine, I have no problem with trial and error, but the only real issue I take, and it's kind of a large one, is that the 3rd level is so much more difficult than the 1st and the 2nd, and there's no option to continue, and you only get 3 lives. This means that basically you're going to almost immediately know how to pass the first 2 levels, and all you're wanting to do is try to have a go at the 3rd level, which is far more fun to play and far more interesting compared to the 1st and 2nd level, which after doing a couple of times are going to become really boring. It takes 3 minutes and 15 seconds to pass the 1st and the 2nd level, which I think by now I can pretty much do blindfolded, and I cannot count how many times I had to do them only to spend 30 seconds on the 3rd level, losing all of my lives on a blind jump that has to be made on a dime. I really don't want to know how many times I missed these jumps, and this is not all of them, but bear in mind, every 3 times you see me dying in this compilation means another 3 minutes and 15 seconds going through the first 2 levels, which at this point I've committed to memory. And so I suppose the only downside to this entire game is that it desperately needs a continue option, because if you've already mastered the first 2 levels and just want to practice on the 3rd one, you're going to be extremely frustrated and somewhat bored being forced to play the first 2 levels again, and again, and again. This aside, however, Reindeer Rescue is still definitely worth the play. It's a beautiful game with great graphics, tight control, interesting level design and gameplay, and gives you plenty of Christmas cheer. And also, it should be noted that the art on the manual and cartridge is extremely charming. So if you're looking for a frustrating but festive game to play this holiday season, then head down to your local video store and pick up a copy of Reindeer Rescue for the Atari 2600.